Good morning, my friends. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Aunt Patty, the carnivore hippie, and carnivore. Hopefully I'm not a bore. Anyway, what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about calories. Do I count them? What the heck is a calorie anyway? A calorie, or a big C calorie, or kilocalorie, or large calorie, is the amount of heat that's necessary to raise the temperature of 1 liter of water by 1 degree Celsius within a closed system. That's what a calorie is. The term was coined in about 1820 by a researcher named Nicholas Clement, who was doing experiments regarding fuel consumption for steam engines. So how did it end up being turned into a metric for food energy? Well, in the early part of the 20th century, a chemist named Wilbur Olin Atwater was doing research experiments on metabolism for the Department of Agriculture. Mostly these were concerned with livestock animals, cows, pigs, chickens. They were trying to formulate a standardization for how much these animals should be fed and what kind of food they should be fed in order to get them fattened up for market. Obviously, very useful if you want to sell beef or chicken or pork. So Mr. Atwater had been doing experiments on animals, and in the around 1910, he developed a machine called a direct calorimeter. They use direct calorimeters now, even in for medical purposes, but basically was a big metal box where big enough for a human being to be put inside of it and stay inside there comfortably for a period of days. And the metal box had a ventilation system and various apertures through which food or other items could be introduced and waste material could be removed. And as the human being stayed inside there and ate a specific diet and went through various exercises, all of the food that went in that was measured, all of the excreta that came out was measured, and also the air that the subject breathed was also extracted and analyzed very carefully. And many of these experiments were done. Please keep in mind that this is a closed system, okay? Free living human beings do not live in a closed system, so there is some limitation to his findings in that respect. But over 500 human experiments were done under his direction, and he compiled all of his data into tables that generalized the amount of food, the amount of waste, and the amount of carbon dioxide and other gases that were exhaled by the human being during this process. And from this, he was able to, he believed, generalize the amount of energy a human being could derive from a particular piece of food. Okay, now it is worth mentioning that Mr. Atwater himself recognized the limitations of his experiments. Number one, they were within a closed system. Number two, most of his human subjects were young, healthy, fit males, athletic, because those were the ones who were most likely to volunteer for this kind of a study. And so he understood that his results were not extrapolable across the general population, especially not women and children. So that's the first thing. So do I count calories? No, I don't. And the reason is because this is my train of thought. I'm not teaching anybody facts here. This is just how I figured. Number one, the term calorie I think is misleading because Mr. Atwater kind of confiscated it from a different from a different scientific area, and it's not going to be directly applicable. I think it's confusing. So I realize that's a quibble. But number two, again, these experiments having been done on animals and on only athletic young men are not extrapolable across the general population. So what an athletic young man would have to eat to maintain their body mass would be completely different from what like I would have to eat to maintain my body composition. So yeah, not applicable. The third is there is no way to predict what the food energy is in a particular piece of food. Even two pieces of food, two same size pieces of, say, steak or potato, even if they're similarly sourced, even if they're exactly the same weight, even if they're cooked exactly the same, there is no way to assure that the exact same food energy is going to be existent in that piece of food, or that the exact same food energy is going to be absorbed by an individual, even upon different circumstances, or much less between two completely different people, right? That's just not predictable. Thirdly is fats and carbohydrates are metabolized by much different pathways in the human body than are proteins. Proteins mostly get used to build body structures, unless you're just eating tremendous amounts of protein. Most people have a natural satiety signal for protein, and as a result, people rarely overeat protein. There seems to be some sort of inborn mechanism to stop that from happening. Most people eat protein to about 15 to 20% of their food energy intake, and don't go above that naturally. So this kind of argues toward the idea that proteins metabolize differently. And in fact, we can actually radioactively code proteins and watch where they go in the body, and we can actually measure under certain circumstances how much of the protein was available to the cells as energetic substrate and how much of it went actually into building blocks of the physical body. So we know that most protein that most people eat is not available to the mitochondria as energy substrate. So counting those calories is misleading. Eat 100 calories of protein, you have no way of knowing how much of that 100 calories is going to be usable or burnt by your cells as energy. Whereas fat and glucose, or fat and carbohydrates, are mostly used as energy substrate. A small amount of fat gets used in bodily structures, but most of it ends up as energetic substrate or energy substrate. So there's that. And lastly, I know from tracking my own intake that if I change my food energy intake drastically to a large extent over the short term, my body composition doesn't change. If I say pig out for a couple of weeks over Christmas, by the end of January, I'm back where I started, despite eating ad libitum, which I do. And then likewise, if I restrict my intake for whatever reason, last spring I had a terrible ear infection and it upset my equilibrium and it gave me vertigo and terrible nausea all the time. I could barely eat a thing for about 3 weeks and I did lose some weight. But by about a month, 4 weeks after my recovery from that situation, I was back to where I started. So this really tells me in strong terms that there's something else other than food intake that is driving my body composition. Of course, food intake does affect your body composition, but it's not about the calories in it. It's about how your body reacts to that food. So one could argue that it was a change in my appetite that accounted for the return to pre-feast or fast status. But even that kind of argues toward the idea that there's something other than just intake that is determining whether my body composition changes or not. As if it was just the food and I was eating ad libitum before the feast or the fast, and then I changed my intake, it seems logical to me that in the majority of the cases, if I gained a little weight and then I went back to eating ad libitum, weight would probably hang around and not go away, but it does. And if I stop eating for a period of time and I lose a little weight, and then I go back to eating ad libitum again, and I just allow my appetite to normalize itself, it seems to me that the lost weight should stay gone. And I should just stay where I am, weight-wise. But no, it goes back up to where it was before the fast, generally. So it makes logical sense to me to presume that there's something, not being a nutrition scientist, I'm not a biologist, but it makes sense that there's something driving my body composition besides just the amount of energy that is coming in to my food. So, or with my food. So that's why I don't count calories. And if that's what you want to do, you know, you do you, but I'm not going to do it. And in my experience with most people that I know that don't do it, they don't have any problem with it either. I find I used to count calories and do a whole bunch of stuff to try to lose weight. And the harder I tried, you know, following standard American diet, of course, the harder I tried, the harder it got. And eventually I developed symptoms of disordered eating. This was when I was much bigger. And then, interestingly, at one point, I just threw up my hands and gave up. I just gave up. I thought, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to lose weight. I'm just going to give it up. And you know what? Once I gave up trying to lose weight and gave up trying to track all that stuff and just let it go and just decided, well, if I was going to be fat, I was going to be the healthiest fat I could be and just leave it at that. Once I made that determination, the symptoms of disordered eating went away. They were all due to the stress of trying to follow the rules. You know, I don't follow anybody else's rules anymore. After about 3 to 4 years, I follow my own rules now. You know what? I still lose weight slowly, but that's okay with me because everything about my life is so much better. Anyway, that's all today. That's all I have to say about calories. And you know what these are? Whoop! You know what these are? You know what the sub box is? And you know where the bell is. You know what to do with them. Please activate them. I love you all. I'll talk to you again later. Bye.